When Azura Quinn stepped into the grand hall, every scornful gaze fell upon her. Bitter whispers echoed through the air. Until the glass doors swung open, Thaddeus Sterling emerged, upending every prejudice and unveiling the truth behind the spectacle, changing fate forever. Beneath the shimmering glow of crystal chandeliers, like frozen snowflakes suspended in light, Azura Quinn entered the grand hall with a serene grace. A wisp of mist drifting through a sea of opulent strangers, each step she took echoed softly on the marble floor, stirring faint, bitter whispers. Is she wearing second-hand? That outdated dress must be from some antique market. The murmurs began as fleeting breezes, just enough to ignite a subtle wave of prejudice among the gathered elite, a fog of disdain enveloping the room. Azura Quinn's stark simplicity, her smoke-gray linen dress, her hair tied low and neat, fueled the scrutinizing gazes and ceaseless chatter. As she approached the check-in desk, Marceline Harlow glanced up, her voice cool and clipped. "Please use the staff entrance." Her hand tapped the clipboard against the metal frame, as if underscoring a hierarchy. No smile, only a stiff nod from the powerful concierge. The air grew taut, like the prelude to a crescendo. Each breath seemed to freeze, withholding any explanation. Marceline's sharpness made Azura's lips press thinly, her calm as fragile as mist, yet her eyes remained steady, like a cool spring flowing over stone, soothing the hardness encasing her heart. At that moment, 3 figures glided through the crowd. Seraphine Vale in a blazing velvet red gown, her glasses glinting like blades. Zephyrine Cross draped in jet-black sequins, her laughter hissing through gritted teeth. And Calliope Stroud, crowned with a pristine feathered hat, her smile coy amid the lavish scene. They paused, their eyes sweeping over Azura Quinn, and a cloud of mockery burst forth. "Is that a wedding gift or, look, a cheap bakery rainbow? Did she wander in by mistake?" Their laughter rang sharply, each word a poisoned arrow. Phones were raised, live streams capturing every detail, from the wrinkles in her linen to the faint dust. On her heels, preserving the outsider against the velvet and gold backdrop. The cruel jest didn't stop at glances, but spread through whispers as Leander Blackwood and Sable Whitaker leaned close, their eyes flickering with playful judgment. Get ready for her authentic farmer's speech. A chill of contempt swept through, freezing the atmosphere, turning every guest into an anonymous juror. Beneath the gilded walls, each judgmental glance was a silent verdict, and Azura Quinn became the eye of a storm of sedimented bias, a symbol of terrifying difference. Yet amid that sea of people, her composure held firm. Her hazel eyes, gentle as a still autumn lake, radiated unshakable dignity. She offered no verbal retort, letting her gaze speak instead, like a stream inviting understanding over scorn. With each step, she moved away from the dazzling lights, carrying her gift wrapped in recycled fabric, a seed of sincerity in a desert of arrogance, leaving behind the hollow, ringing laughter, a reminder that this world is all too fragile. Before the first whispers of judgment, beneath the cold gleam of crystal, chandeliers reflecting every sense, Azura Quinn paused before the golden-laid doors of the main banquet hall, where the scent of white roses and the strains of a string orchestra wove into a lavish symphony. The silence was so profound that each step on the marble floor rang like a bell tolling in the night. She clutched her recycled leather clutch, the only gift she carried, like an anchor of pride amidst a sea of prying eyes. Every glance, whether casual or deliberate, tore through the sparkling veneer, revealing an unspoken divide, those who belonged to the elite and the outcast on this grand stage. Azura's steps led her to the reception desk, where Marceline Harlow, her face as sharp and unyielding as dry ice, stood with a clipboard at the ready. The concierge raised an eyebrow, her thin lips parting like a blade. "Your invitation?" Her voice didn't need to be harsh to make the air around them constrict, like an iron cage locking away any explanation. Azura calmly produced the invitation, her hand steady, as if presenting a manifesto of her right to exist. The cream-colored card, embossed with gold lettering, glided past the concierge's fingers, only to be returned with a scrutinizing glance. "Staff entrance," Marceline Harlow declared, her gesture pointing to a side corridor marked "Personnel," crystallizing the invisible prejudice. Azura's footsteps fell in a steady, unhurried rhythm, leading her into the dimly lit corridor where wall sconces cast fragile patches of light on tiled bricks. Each breath she took echoed, evoking a solitary symphony of estrangement. Beneath a wall adorned with marble orchids, she caught the sound of stifled giggles. Did she wander into the main hall by mistake? That plain outfit? Probably at the wrong event. Those jests, cloaked in casual veneer, spread like gray ink in a clear lake, clouding the purity of her presence. As Azura rounded a corner, two security figures, Cassian Archer and Orion Wells, stood waiting like sentinels awaiting a summons. Their eyes said nothing, but their intent was clear. "You're not on the VIP list." No questions, only a heavy silence, thick as ice, barring her apart from the opulent world beyond. At times she felt the distinct pulse of her own heartbeat, like a silent alarm, yet she kept her back straight, her head unbowed. The faint rustle of her linen dress broke the artificial stillness. Azura's gaze swept the corridor, where doors softly slammed shut each time a VIP passed, like gates separating two worlds. Those who had touched power, could not fathom her, someone who chose a raw, honest path. The scent of lilies from a nearby vase drifted by, tracing a delicate outline around the tense scene. In that moment, memories of the whispers in the grand hall resurfaced, now faded echoes giving way to the sudden sound of Persephone Knight's approaching steps. The event planner appeared like a living statue, lips pursed, eyes probing, brimming with unspoken judgments. "Azura Quinn, your invitation is valid, but this is a high society event, and you're not dressed appropriately." Persephone's voice was like chalk on a wall, framing Azura as the outsider. Without waiting for a reply, she addressed the security. "Guards, escort her to the lower level, the staff area." Under the suffocating pressure, Azura gave a slight nod, offering no argument. Her eyes retained their phoenix-like glow, smoldering with quiet sorrow, but undiminished. She walked decisively, leaving behind the corridor strung with faint purple lights, where every mirror reflected the harshness of prejudice. With each step toward the exit, she carried a silent question. Would this world ever allow a sincere heart to enter when the walls of class stood so firmly? And would her own voice be loud enough to shatter that invisible barrier? Beneath the crystal chandeliers like frozen dewdrops, Octavia Hartwell emerged like a resplendent goddess amid clouds of artificial mist, her mermaid gown encrusted with crystals shimmering with each step, as if mist had solidified in the opulent air. A veil of murmurs swirled around her, accentuating an untouchable majesty. The moment Octavia's gaze locked onto Azura Quinn, all sound retreated, like a prelude choked in a moment of absolute silence. Then, a hoarse, blade-sharp laugh pierced the air. "Surprising, you showed up." Her voice tracing a sinister edge around the words, making even the gold-plated walls listen. "Linen dress or couture? You've wandered into the wrong hall, Azura." Octavia's laughter fell like acid, splashing across the hall, turning every light into rays that tore through the atmosphere. The surrounding crowd buzzed into a swarm of wasps, weaving chaotically before surging forward with whispers and judgments. Riven Hawthorne smirked, raising her phone to record the moment, her face detached like a dancer swaying to discordant music. Seraphine Vale, Zephyrine Cross, and Calliope Stroud edged closer, hands brushing their lavish gowns, eyes flickering with scrutiny, like predators catching the scent of blood in a dark forest. They exchanged silent, conspiratorial glances. She's performing a circus act on this gilded stage. Amid the diamond waltz, Azura Quinn's heartbeat seemed to slow, each breath turning into fragile mist. She didn't bow her head or resist. She merely held her hazel eyes steady, their dignity a storm lantern in an ocean tempest. The recycled paper gift she clutched tightly was like a glowing ember, promising quiet warmth amid the icy chill, but the space allowed no warmth. A forest of raised phones flashed like lasers, capturing every moment, turning her quiet confidence into a public jest. Then the footsteps of Cassian Archer and Orion Wells echoed through the Diamond Palace. They appeared like two towering obsidian stones, faces impassive, but every gesture meticulously calculated, an unwritten law permitting the expulsion of the misplaced. "Ma'am, please follow us." Cassian Archer's voice slipped through gritted teeth, formal enough to need no further explanation. Orion Wells stood beside him, his gaze deep as the ocean floor, containing any potential eruption. The crowd parted, forming a thorny corridor toward the exit doors. Sharp, cutting remarks sliced through the air. "Who does she think she is? Go home and change into pajamas." Cringe beyond belief. Each laugh was a needle-piercing skin, numbing the scalp. Yet Azura Quinn walked with poise, her linen dress rustling like golden leaves in a silent forest, each sway a testament to unshakable calm. As the final door closed behind her, the cruel whispers faded, giving way to the silent darkness of the auxiliary corridor. Dim lights grazed Azura's face, tracing ripples of emotion beneath her taut composure, like silk stretched over a frame, yet not a single tear fell. In that solitary moment between two worlds, she was a lone star, cast out from a sky that was never hers, yet carrying an unextinguished flame of sincerity. And so, the cruel jest reached its climax, ending in an empty scene where every slander shattered into glittering mirror shards, reflecting the true vanity of their source. Beneath chandeliers like cascading stars, Azura Quinn moved through the grand hall, filled with silk-draped tables and arches of pristine orchids. But instead of reverence, the air rang with a chorus of mockery. The string orchestra's drumbeats fell silent, overtaken by the crowd's shrill laughter, like a swarm of bees unleashed. As Cassian Archer lightly touched her elbow, not to support, but to guide her, each of Azura's steps thundered like lightning in a clear sky, briefly silencing the jeering stares, in awe. Yet, in an instant, the screw of cruelty twisted every face, turning her poised smile into cold ash. The clack of Orion Wells' leather heels trailed behind, sharp as a blade slicing through the taut curtain of prestige. From a nearby table, Seraphine Vale smirked, her laugh dripping like acid rain. Look at her gliding by like she's starring in a tragic play on a gala stage. The influencer waved her hand, phone raised high, capturing every humiliating moment of Azura Quinn. Champagne droplets still clinging to her glass, splashing onto the smoke-gray linen dress like ink stains on white paper. Nearby, Zephyrin Cross and Calliope Stroud jostled each other, their whisper, "That dress is now a beach cover-up," pressing Azura into the darkest corner. As Calliope playfully raised her champagne flute, a small flick sent the heady liquid spilling over Azura's collar, seeping into the linen like blood on a page. The clink of glasses rang dry, like bones snapping on a wooden floor. Not stopping there, Riven Hawthorne, known for lightning-fast live streams, switched to portrait mode, her lips mouthing, "This is peak content," across social media platforms. Comments flooded in like a torrent. "Punch her, send her packing, leave her here." Each word flashed before Azura's eyes like a sword slashing veins, yet her face remained serene, though her heart froze with each beat. At the VIP table, Leander Blackwood sipped pearl champagne, his gravelly voice carrying, "Who let her in? Wrong address, maybe?" Sable Whitaker crossed her arms, her gaze like cold steel. Truly a farmer's market lost in a couture vault. They barely hid their gleeful satisfaction at witnessing the downfall of the unfortunate, turning the festive scene into a public arena of scorn. The rustle of the folded invitation in Azura's hand reminded her of the true value of sincerity. But no one cared anymore. Her recycled paper gift, where she poured her earnestness, was dismissed as trash, an invisible slap to her dignity. As the encircling crowd slowly dispersed, only Azura Quinn, Cassian Archer, Orion Wells, and the clean glass door at the corridor's end remained. She stood like a lotus in mire, unyielding and upright. Her eyes flickered, radiant with defiance like a shooting star in the night, challenging an ocean of prejudice. The door swung open. Blinding light outside shone like a promise of another world, where she no longer had to bow to mockery. The final bitter laughs faded, leaving in Azura's heart a fragile but hopeful peace, a certainty that she would never let today's cruel jest define her worth. Under the blazing Riviera sun, the air seemed to freeze as a fleet of sleek black Rolls-Royces lined up before the five-star hotel's grand entrance. The soft hum of their engines sounded like an opening command, resonating through the champagne and tuberose-laden atmosphere, settling like a grand symphony reaching its close. All eyes turned toward the glass doors, where a tall man's silhouette loomed against the tempered partition. Thaddeus Sterling appeared like a furious storm crashing into the reckless revelry. His charcoal suit clung perfectly to his frame, sculpted as if from granite, not a single crease marring its surface. His jet-black hair slicked back framed a broad forehead that commandeered the sunlight. His steel-gray eyes swept the crowd, each glance a whirlwind, silencing all noise and scattering the earlier gossip into oblivion. From the moment Thaddeus Sterling stepped onto the marble stairs, the guests, from Octavia Hartwell in her exorbitant crystal gown to influencers like Seraphine Vale, Zephyrin Cross, and Calliope Stroud, froze, their breaths involuntarily faltering. The string orchestra's music cut off abruptly, leaving only the clatter of whispers. Is that really him? He rarely shows up in public. The space turned as still as an icy cavern, the chandelier's crystals trembling faintly with the rhythm of power's approach. Thaddeus Sterling strode directly toward Azura Quinn, who stood leaning on Cassian Archer's arm, her face as calm as an unruffled lake. He stopped beside her, his presence as natural as a spring cascade thundering down a cliff. Without a hint of hesitation, his gaze met hers, carrying a promise more steadfast than any public declaration. In that fleeting moment, every prejudice and sneer seemed swept away by the vortex of authority he commanded. Suddenly, Thaddeus's voice rose, warm and resonant with undeniable power. Apologies for the interruption, each word crisp, awakening every sense in the hall. I'd like to introduce the most important person in my life. The statement struck like blinding lightning, tearing through the stifling noise, drawing all eyes to the woman at his side. This is my wife, Azura Quinn. The resolute declaration landed like a sledgehammer, igniting a chaotic chorus of gasps. Octavia Hartwell's jaw dropped, her crystal earrings swaying with the weight of shock. Those who had mocked moments before turned to stone, their lips too dry to utter a sound. Seraphine Vale's fingers trembled, her phone slipping into her palm like a lifeless object. Zephyrin Cross paled, the sequins on her gown seemingly ready to shatter into glittering shards mid-air. Calliope Stroud froze, her feathered hat tilting like a bird with a broken wing in a moment of disbelief. Meanwhile, Dashiell Crown, the would-be groom, stepped from the crowd, his voice catching as he looked at Azura Quinn. You're still here?" His eyes shimmered, his soft tone like a spring breeze over cherry blossom hills, laced with surprise and gratitude. The earlier judgments morphed into fear before the pull of sincerity and unfeigned heart. The moment's resonance lingered, each second stretching like the aftershock of a small earthquake, leaving everyone trembling. Security guards, Cassian Archer and Orion Wells stepped back, yielding to the commanding presence. Ambrose Sinclair, the MC, faltered mid-speech, his microphone dropping lightly like a pebble into a still lake. Evadne Mercer approached, her eyes wide with astonishment, swiftly shifting her laptop from checking the guest list to confirming a new marriage. Before the stunned gazes, the opulent atmosphere transformed into a scene celebrating truth. the chandeliers no longer mere decor, but torches illuminating Azura Quinn's dignity. The old, brittle criticisms fell away like chaff, the initial tempest merely a prelude. Now, Thaddeus Sterling and Azura Quinn stood at the eye of the storm, commanding every undercurrent, ushering in a new chapter for the most unforgettable wedding in French Riviera history. In a moment that could not have been more dramatic, Dashiell Crown emerged like an arrow piercing the crowd's heart, storming onto the stage, glittering with shattered crystal crowns behind him. His face blazed red, eyes shimmering with tears of mingled rage and disappointment. The string orchestra's music abruptly ceased, leaving only the gasping breaths of those who had mocked, now staring in shock at a man lost in an inferno of emotion. He boldly raised his phone, its glowing screen a blazing sword, revealing a string of messages between Octavia Hartwell, Seraphine Vale, Zephyrine Cross, and Calliope Stroud. Their cruel plan to humiliate an old friend for self-aggrandizement laid bare. The sound of tearing paper echoed like the ripping of $1 million wedding's false veneer. A white beam on the nearby screen painting a damning portrait of the bride's sins. Each word a razor-sharp dagger carving deep into wounded hearts. The earlier hollow applause morphed into chaotic shouts, pounding like hailstones on Octavia Hartwell's conscience. She stood pale, her lips too dry to muster a defense. Dashiell Crown didn't wait a second longer, his voice ringing like a battle bell heralding an erupting emotional war. "You all turned this wedding into a stage for cheap mockery? You ridiculed Azura Quinn just because she dared to live true to herself, dared to carry a simple gift as pure as her soul." Each word he hurled was like thunder shattering the elite's false shells, leaving the space hollow before an undeniable truth. His words, steely and storm-like, swept through the rows of guests, making Leander Blackwood, Sable Whitaker, and Riven Hawthorne wince, their eyes briefly flickering with shame. He pressed on, his voice rising with each syllable. "You reveled in her expulsion, delighted in the sound of scornful laughter, but you forgot that Azura Quinn and Thaddeus Sterling gave me the hands to build a future. You stripped away the chance to honor friendship, to honor kindness, replacing it with public humiliation." His voice echoed like a current, igniting the stage, drowning out every stray sound. By now, Octavia Hartwell stumbled back, her crystal-encrusted mermaid gown seeming to shed pieces, her hands trembling pitifully. Dashiell Crown showed no mercy, pointing directly at her. "You used an old friend as a prop for your personal PR stunt. Insulted human dignity to polish your name. Ask yourself, will anyone still trust that fake smile?" In his eyes, the pain of betrayal fused with unrelenting resolve, forming a whirlwind of emotion that shattered every illusion's framework. Then, as the climax of his public indictment, Dashiell Crown flung a leather shoe from the banquet table. It soared past Octavia Hartwell's face, grazing the stage's edge before crashing down like a shattered gem. The sound of the shoe hitting the floor marked the end of the deceitful wedding, plunging the space into a silent abyss. He turned and strode off, leaving the bride collapsing under the stage lights. The guests stood frozen, stunned and ashamed, lacking the courage to intervene. The wedding transformed into a wreckage of truth, with no room left for lies or deceit. Only the lingering scent of the fire and smoke from the most unexpected and total reversal in French Riviera history. A hushed stillness enveloped the grand hall as Thaddeus Sterling ascended the podium, his gaze sweeping across a space shaken by recent events, like a volcano stirring awake, swallowing all sounds, footsteps, whispers, and mocking laughter, into a vacuum of silence. He raised his arm, his voice warm yet commanding. "It is time to set every truth in its rightful place." Instantly, the screen behind him blazed to life, displaying the assets of Voss Enterprises, each gold-plated hotel, every high-end fashion brand and line of luxury cosmetics. Captioned, "Half of this is owned by Azura Quinn." The financial map shone like a portrait of glory, revealing her position, a woman sidelined the day before, now wielding undeniable power. All eyes erupted in chaos, trembling lips unable to hold back excuses. Evadne Mercer, gripping her tablet, activated the guest list, cross-referenced with livestream history mode, each line of data slowly unveiling the names of guests who had disparaged Azura Quinn. Each name was marked in red, flagged with violation of respect protocols. Without hesitation, Thaddeus Sterling nodded, signaling two security officers, Cassian Archer and Orion Wells, to initiate the expulsion list. They methodically approached those who had dared mock her. Seraphine Vale trembled as her name was called, dropping her live-streaming phone. Zephyrine Cross stared wide-eyed, her feathered shawl falling like a shattered butterfly. Calliope Stroud awkwardly shoved her hands into her pockets, the sequins on her dress flickering like a chaotic sky. The hall echoed with the sharp clack of security's boots, escorting each problematic guest toward the door, where the morning light flickered out of sync, like wanderers lost among coral reefs. The glass doors slammed shut behind them, a drumbeat signaling transparency and justice. Leander Blackwood and Sable Whitaker, once scornful of her, now slunk away with bowed heads, their vibrant tuxedo and dazzling satin gown left stranded in the corridor. Amidst this, Dashiell Crown stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'm sorry, I was too blind to let mockery drown out reason. I'm grateful for every step you took that helped me stand firm today." His heartfelt words, like a cool stream, washed away the dark stains, eliciting soft cheers from the crowd, evoking the power of gratitude and sincerity. At once, Ambrose Sinclair, the MC, was invited forward, his voice warm as a spring breeze.
"On behalf of all guests, I announce today's wedding will proceed in a spirit of respect and cherishing honest values."
A round of applause followed, this time born of unity, not hollow laughter. Finally, under the solemn witness of Father Quintus Holliday, Azura Quinn and Thaddeus Sterling drew near, hand in hand, stepping into a scene adorned with pristine white orchids. As warm vows resonated, their commitment needed no ink or paper, for truth and justice had already been established. The guests, from the farthest to those who once mocked her, now stood still in reverence, feeling the warmth of a true justice reborn at the heart of this $1,000,000 wedding. Beneath a canopy of shimmering lanterns hanging high like golden droplets scattered across the space, Azura Quinn and Thaddeus Sterling stepped softly into a picturesque scene framed by sea-facing cliffs, where the tender strains of a violin melded with the distant murmur of waves. Each step they took seemed to paint a new rhythm for the celebration, echoing the faint heartbeat of dawn breaking over the ocean. Azura's ivory gown flowed like a cascade of silk, its golden threads glinting faintly under the lights, illuminating her radiant elegance. A symbol of rebirth needing no crown, only a steadfast heart. Beside her, Thaddeus's sleek tuxedo hugged his frame like refined armor, each tailored line etching his resolve to protect the woman he cherished. Their hands touched, their gazes intertwining like twin stars converging in the night sky, outshining every crystal chandelier. Around them, the once rowdy, scornful crowd fell silent, as if entranced by a spell of harmony. Ambrose Sinclair, the MC, gave a subtle nod, setting a gentle rhythm to guide the couple into a fervent waltz. The violin's notes rose like the breath of the heavens, drawing every soul into a dance of justice and love. Eyes that once cut through layers of multicolored orchid glass now fixed solely on Azura Quinn and Thaddeus Sterling, their figures gleaming amidst the sea of guests, a living relief carved into the grandeur of the hall. Amid the music, the lantern's glow spilled into every corner like fallen stars, tracing the remnants of the previous night's cruel smirks, now dissolving into wisps of fragile smoke. Evadne Mercer, the senior assistant, discreetly operated the stage screen, displaying staggering figures. Azura Quinn's wedding clip trending with 30 million views, social media flooded with praise. Each rising number pulsed like waves of admiration, elevating the true worth of a sincere heart, wholly replacing the facade that once shrouded her. Hashtags like Queen Azura and Love in Truth flashed like emblems proclaiming justice had been established. Value lay not in superficial glamour but in unyielding resilience. The music softened, giving way to the final pronouncement by Father Quintus Holiday, the elderly priest whose kind eyes resembled verdant fields, blessing a love that had weathered storms. His prayer flowed like a cool stream, soothing wounds and mending the scars of prejudice. In those blessings, Azura felt warm currents of energy from the earth and sky, like a flower blooming after a long rain, its fragrance wafting through the pristine air. As the main ceremony concluded, the couple stepped onto the terrace, where white fairy lights and paper lanterns gleamed like crescent moons. Cassian Archer and Orion Wells arranged the banquet tables beneath olive trees, where white orchids were woven into small crowns, honoring restored pride. Riven Hawthorne, Leander Blackwood, and Sable Whitaker, once skeptical, now stood in quiet awe, their eyes brimming with genuine respect. The shift from disdain to admiration formed an undercurrent, enriching the serene yet powerful moment. Finally, as the waltz's last note melted into the night, the couple shared a gentle kiss, like a symphony closing on a soaring high note, affirming they were not merely the stars of a lavish stage but witnesses to a story of authentic value, rising above fleeting glamour. The world would remember this wedding not for scandals or wealth, but for Azura Quinn, the woman reborn in the glow of courage, and Thaddeus Sterling, the silent general guarding justice with love. And as the lights dimmed, whispers turned to song. This was a journey of the heart, where true worth shone forever. After a dramatic journey, Azura Quinn and Thaddeus Sterling have proven that true value lies not in glamour, but in the heart. Steadfast resolve, and overflowing inspiration. Thank you for watching the Millionaire and Heart Stories channel. See you on the next adventure.